evening, all. Well, I haven't tried air trombone before, and I don't think I'll ever will again after that shameful performance. Anyway, what's been going on this week that has caught my attention? Quite a lot, and for once, it's the Liberal Democrats. Well, yes, the Liberal Democrats have been very busy this week, but where to begin? Well, I think let's tackle the recent party defections, and well, some of them were just had the whip withdrawn from their own parties, and they've gone off to find a home in the Liberal Democrats. Now, on the surface of things, I don't mind that because I think politics, both in the United Kingdom and in the United States, and also in France, have been infected with Clintonian and Blairism, the third way. And what it's trying to do is try and merge all mainstream political parties into one kind of progressive left globalist political ideology. So what you had, particularly in the United Kingdom, were attempts to make the Labour Party and the Conservative Party just adopt Blairism third way. And it's backfiring. Now, I believe there are natural homes for people in politics. What do I think for the Labour Party, for example? Well, I actually think the Labour Party could divide easily into a kind of a more progressive social democrat party. In fact, let's call that the Social Democrats, right? And that's where your Blairites, or some of them, would go. And then Labour would be left for kind of more traditional, a little bit more socialist, a little bit more stick up for the working man kind of party that it always intended to be, but has been often derailed. And that can be there. I actually think Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell and Momentum actually belong in the Socialist Worker Party. I don't think they belong in the Labour Party. The Conservatives shouldn't be afraid of becoming more conservative, and in fact, I would like to see on the right kind of a libertarian movement, just a creation of a libertarian party, and see how that would manifest itself in British politics. I'd like to see a Conservative Party being basically conservative, broad church, right wing, and everybody else can go in the Liberal Democrats. Why not? Why not? So I'm glad that some of these charlatans, I think they are political charlatans, are ending up in a party that is more in line with how they always thought. But they thought that the Lib Dems, didn't have as big a name. It wasn't the route to power. So they joined the Conservatives or Labour instead. And they've been trying to derail both parties ever since. So the latest high-profile name is Sam Gyimah. I say high-profile. I mean, a few weeks ago, he was running for the Conservative leadership. But now he's a Lib Dem. Now, the thing about Gyimah is that I first became aware of him a couple of years ago when he was the Conservative Minister for Higher Education. And one of the things he said he wanted to tackle at the time was the free speech clampdown on campuses. So campuses, no platforming speakers or clamping down on free speech and sort of trying to introduce very draconian hate speech policies into British campuses. And he said he would introduce legislation to stop that and to preserve British universities as a place of free thought and free inquiry, and kind of clip the wings of social justice advocates who wanted to ban all kinds of speech, or perhaps even push for criminalisation, or have lecturers thrown out of their jobs. The danger was at that time that British universities could go down the route of some American campuses that we saw, like Evergreen, or in Canada, Wilfrid Laurier. But he did nothing about it. I mean, he said he was going to introduce legislation. He said he was going to tackle it. He was a damp squib in the end. And I lost a lot of respect because he just didn't. He talked the talk, but he didn't walk the walk. I mean, I know some conservatives say, oh, they've met Gyimah, and he's a big believer in liberty, and I say to them, I've not seen that manifested in his career. I'm sorry, but he talked a good game, but he never followed up on it. Now he's joined the Liberal Democrats, a party that is under Joe Swinson, is very much in favour of expanding hate speech legislation and categorising a whole new bunch of things as hate crimes. So how does that fit in with his libertarian kind of freedom and liberty proclamations, it seems an odd mix. I mean, this whole thing that I just find distasteful about these 21 Conservative MPs who had the whip withdrawn is that for years they've been saying, well, let's have a soft Brexit. Okay, let's debate about that. Let's have a second referendum. Okay, yeah, again, we can talk about that. But now they're joining a party that is absolutely opposed to Brexit and will absolutely revoke Article 50 and nullify the 2016 referendum result, which is the next thing I want to talk about with the Lib Dems. So Joe Swinson proposed a motion that was accepted by the Liberal Democrat membership that the Liberal Democrats are going to be the anti-Brexit party, and if they form a majority government, they will not only revoke Article 50, they will nullify the 2016 Brexit referendum result. We've known this for ages, but I think what really gets to me and gets to a lot of other people is the hypocrisy and opportunism of how they're going about doing this. Remember, they were in favour of a referendum on membership in the European Union far back as 2010. They supported the Conservatives' plan to hold a referendum. They said, their leader Nick Clegg said, echoing a lot of other MPs at the time, this is a once-in-a-generation decision and that the result would be implemented. Then after that, the Liberal Democrat, Jo Swinson among them, she said this, she's on record saying this, said that they would respect the referendum result. And then she's been pushing all this time for a people's vote, a second referendum. Now, all that's abandoned. I've actually put it to the Liberal Democrats. I've actually written to them saying, so is this people's vote going to be cancelled now? You're not going to push for a people's vote? I want to make sure what their plans are. I haven't heard anything back from them. I don't expect to hear anything back from them because they have to make it a mission that all their talk about a people's vote was just a pure sham. And that's what it is. I mean, if the Liberal Democrats were consistent, they would have been always the anti-Brexit party. We always knew deep down, but they made these platitudes. Oh no, we'll respect the referendum result. No. We'll have a second referendum. Okay, to make sure people really know. But since Swinson has been elected leader of the Liberal Democrats, she's gone back on all that thing, gone back on things she even said and positions she even supported. At this point, the whole notion that the Lib Dems are either liberal or democratic is a sham as well. These are political opportunists. They're grifters of the highest order. And they've now got a third of their parliamentary party are now people who were once, or who were elected at the last general election for different parties. So a third of her parliamentary seats are fellow grifters who have defected. And you know, it's a sham, but it's a sham that seems to attract Remain voters. You know, the mask is really slipping from Remain now. The idea that they were ever going to have a people's vote, a second referendum, a kind of a chance to debate things more. No. It's all about whatever it takes to cancel Brexit. That's all the Lib Dems are interested in. Speaking of what Remainers will do in order to remain in the European Union, there's been some attempts to take the British government to court to stop Brexit, or at least to stop no deal Brexit, or to somehow find some criminal act in the Prime Minister's dealings. And so cases have been taken to the Scottish courts and to the Northern Ireland courts. And the Northern Ireland courts are just throwing the thing back. No, this is along with attempts to get the police to investigate the Leave campaign, which they've just said there's nothing to investigate. The case against Darren Grimes has been dropped. The stuff towards the High Court to stop no deal Brexit has been thrown out. It's been thrown out. Every time it goes to the court, it gets thrown out. But there may be hope in the Scottish legal system. Remember, the Scottish legal system that likes to prosecute people for telling jokes. So at the moment, it's fail from Remain going through the legal channels. But that doesn't stop them from peddling the line that Brexit was unlawful, illegal. They'll still push that, even though the courts and the police are just going, nah. And let's get this right. This is our very woke police force going, nah. Okay, let that sink in. So let's go back to Jo Swinson here, because she's been in the job of Lib Dem leader for a few weeks now. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say she's potentially the worst Lib Dem leader they've ever had. And I know there's a few to choose from, but I think when I look back since the creation of the Liberal Democrat Party in 1987, Paddy Ashdown was very good at debating, very good at communicating his ideas, a tough parliamentarian, as befitting a man who used to be in the Royal Marines and the Special Boat Service. I mean, extramarital affair aside, he seemed like a strong personality and character. He had Mies Campbell, who was a lot more staid, dry, fussy, a horrible wet. He was supposedly a foreign policy and defence expert, but he was very horribly wet. And you had Charles Kennedy, great in Parliament, great debater, great at the rhetoric, but he was an alcoholic, which led to his untimely death. Since then, you've had a very wet Tim Farron, who had to resign because his Christian beliefs were incompatible with the kind of progressive left malarkey of the Liberal Democrats. Heaven knows what his positions would be now on things like trans issues and TERFs and the Islamic attitude towards both women and the transgendered. I don't think Tim Farron would cope in current year. It wasn't that long ago since he was Liberal Democrat leader. How things have moved on in the progressive liberal sphere. So we've had Vince Cable, dotty old Uncle Vince. We had a couple of near misses. The scandal wrecked Simon Hughes, Mark Oaten, and Chris Herner. I think that was my favourite political scandal of the last 15 years. Was the drunk driving incident and the extremely bitter divorce between him and his wife. Goodness me. Look that one up if you're not familiar with it. But now we got Swinson, who is quite the authoritarian, a little tin pot tyrant that she is. She has all the charm and personality of an authoritarian primary school teacher who not only wants to keep the naughty kids in line, but she views all the kids as essentially naughty, and they all need absolutely the firm hand of a strict classroom and excessively applied health and safety legislation. This is a woman that wants to expand the definition of hate crimes, have more categories, and wants to criminalise wolf whistling. I know it is gauche, yes, I know it is gauche, it is vulgar, and in an ideal world it shouldn't be done, but criminalise? Really? Really? Again, it's the infantilization of 50% of the population. Yes, but men don't get it. I understand, I said it's gauche, but really, do we want to waste the court's time when we've got stabbings going on, when we've got so much stuff going on? Do we really want it? But anyway, a little tin pot tyrant Swinson needs friends, she needs allies, she needs like minds, and who better to invite over to the Liberal Democrat conference than a fellow tin pot tyrant, Guy Verhofstadt. Yes. So he came and spoke to the Liberal Democrats, held up his bollocks to Brexit t-shirt gift in one of the more cringe-worthy, I mean, goodness me, Peter Lilly singing about benefits cheats, some fringe nutter from the early 90s banging on in a Conservative conference about bringing back the birch for rapists. I mean, nothing, believe me, nothing compares to a bunch of Lib Dem women in bollocks to Brexit t-shirts holding up one for Guy Verhofstadt's pleasure and sort of turning around doing this, strong women. Yeah. Anyway, but Verhofstadt is the tin pot tyrant's tin pot tyrant. I'm sorry, I've just got the cat again. There she goes. Um, so he comes over and he starts talking about we're in an age of empires: Chinese Empire, Russian Empire, American Empire. So it's time to have the EU empire. Well, here's the thing: I don't think those others are empires. I don't think Russia's got an empire. I mean, it's trying to get an empire. America hasn't got an empire. It's just spheres of influence, sort of large countries exerting their sphere of influence. So he's using empire to mean, well, the EU should come together and be like a competitive empire with all these other big political entities. But why would anybody want to emulate China or Russia? Okay, I mean, there's nothing envious if you live in a free, liberal, democratic West. Why would you just look over to Russia and China and go, yeah, I'd like me some of that, unless you're an authoritarian. So Verhofstadt's vision for Europe is not one that's free and democratic, because he views America with a lot of distaste and skepticism. So the one large global nation that exerts regional influence, that has actually a modicum of freedom, liberty, and democracy, is the one he doesn't want to emulate most. Is the one he dislikes the most. But he's going on about empires. Now, it wasn't that long ago, and it's still happening, that Remain voters, or just get on FBP, get on social media and get into the news and saying, oh, you Leavers are obsessed with the empire. You want the days of the empire again. And that's apparently a bad thing on me. But for when Guy Verhofstadt gets up in front of the Lib Dem conference and talks about empires, mentions empires 10 times in his speech, and how Europe must become an empire in a world of empires. Oh yeah, he gets a round of applause. He gets a standing ovation. FBP say, oh, no, that's different. What Guy Verhofstadt's saying is different. Right, yeah. It's just the more lies and double tracking and double think from Remainers. So Guy gets up, talks about empires. He didn't push his point, like his views on an EU army. We absolutely need an EU army. Why? Because we have to face the twin threats of Russia and the United States, our NATO ally. And what should the EU army do? Well, it needs to go to Syria and sort out Syria. Now, we on the West, we in NATO, we thought about getting involved in Syria, but there was a big problem, and it's called the Russians, and they won't let us sort out Syria. Okay, even if we really, really wanted to, because if we go in there and we sort of touch the Russians ever so slightly, the Russians will see that as provocation for war. And this, don't remember, a big point of Trump's win. This is what convinced me to support Trump in the end, was that video of Hillary Clinton saying, we will treat a cyber attack on the United States by Russia as a military attack. And she was also pressing for confrontation with the Russians in Syria, over Syrian airspace. She's pushing for war with Russia, and now Guy is doing the same thing. The man is generally unhinged, and I know I'm doing unhinged hands at the moment, but I've got nothing on Guy Verhofstadt. So one last thing before we leave the Lib Dems is this week a lot of Remain MPs showed up at an empty Houses of Parliament since its House of Commons has been prorogued for a few days. And they were there taking selfies of themselves saying, oh, it's absolutely terrible. We should be in Parliament doing our jobs. But Parliament's prorogued because of coup, Eton man bad. So there are two parts of an MP's job. One is being in Westminster, the other is being in their constituencies. And so they should have taken these days to go to their constituencies, particularly if their constituencies voted to leave the European Union. They should be engaging with their public a little bit more. But they didn't, because it's all about what happens in Westminster. And to hell with their constituents. This is a theme. This is a theme that you find with all those 21 Conservative MPs who've had the whip withdrawn from them. This is what you get with the Liberal Democrats. They do not care about their constituents. No, absolutely. I'll just put that out there. They just don't care. It's all about their flexing of their political muscle in Westminster. That's all it's about. And before we leave Brexit for the week, I want to cover the last night of the Proms. Now, for non-British viewers who may not know what that is, the Proms is a summertime classical music festival, which began at the turn of the 20th century. Sometime a few decades later, it was taken over by the BBC, who effectively run it. And it's a classical music festival. Orchestras and performers from all over the world perform classical music. They usually debut some new pieces as well from contemporary composers. But the last night is a special one. So the first half they will have they'll have choose a piece of music, and that'll be performed. The second half consists of British patriotic sea shanties, Land of Hope and Glory, Rule Britannia, all these British patriotic songs. And people generally adorn themselves in Union flags and hats and jackets with Union flags on them, bob up and down to pomp and circumstance, and kind of, indulge in revelry. It's a bit of a party atmosphere on the last night of the Proms. So what made it different this year was that the Proms was filled with people waving European Union flags. And a lot of people on FBPE took this as a sign that the country is anti-Brexit and pro-European Union. Now, let's have a look at this. This is a far more cynical operation. First of all, this is a classical music festival. To get tickets for the last night of the Proms, you don't just book them. You have to have attended a number of previous Proms concerts to be eligible to get to the last night of the Proms. So this is a very middle class, very London-centric audience that attends the last night of the Proms. Second of all, people were handing out, before people went into the Albert Hall where the Proms takes place, they were handing out EU flags for free. British flags were were sold, but the EU flags were given out for free. So a lot of these kind of middle class pret-a-manger eating people took their EU flags and started brandishing it around, and they were cheering for the European Union. The irony is they're so thick. I mean, this is just absolutely the thickness of it. One thing about this is that the reason that they're doing this is that this is televised. Last night the Proms is televised, so it has a huge audience. So they're thinking, the optics. What they didn't take into consideration, makes them dumber than a bag of spanners, is that they're still singing the patriotic songs. They're still singing Rule Britannia, Britannia rules waves, Britain will never ever shall be slaves. They're all enthusiastically singing these patriotic songs, Land of Hope and Glory, and waving EU flags. The power of the words, the power of the lyrics, the power of the music trumps any of these kind of cheap, pathetic stunts. But in a kind of metaphor for the difference between Remainers and Leavers, because the last night of the Proms is so popular and people want that party atmosphere, but the Albert Hall has a finite capacity, they have something called Proms in the Park at the same time. So this is Hyde Park. It's open, thousands of people, more people can get to see the Proms, and it's broadcast on huge, what's going on in the Albert Hall is broadcast on massive TV screens. But it's not just that, they also have their own live music going on all afternoon and into the evening, and they switch to the big screen in the Albert Hall, only for the patriotic sea shanties, Land of Hope and Glory, Rule Britannia, and that thing. But before then, you get an orchestra, you get jazz bands and all that. In the Proms in the Park, the majority of the flags being flown were Union flags. There were a few EU flags. It was mostly Union flags being flown in the park. So all the people, like the people in the cheap seats who couldn't get into the Albert Hall, kind of like the salt of the earth people, are in the park with the Union flags, and it's all the middle class ponces in the Albert Hall with the EU flags. Doesn't that just sum up the divide over Brexit? Now, debates for Brexit, particularly on social media, are very exhausting. I find it very draining at times because of the levels of incivility there. So spare a thought for an American Democrat, Marianne Williamson, spare a thought for her, because she actually said something. I mean, she's a kind of dippy hippie to me, but she did say something that I thought was quite nice, quite profound, a bit on the money, when she commented that she found her political opponents on the right to be far nicer than people on the left. She did interviews with Fox News, and she said, "Oh, the Fox News people always make me feel welcome. They're always nice, and they're always polite, and they always have these kind of nice, rational, reasoned debates." And she finds that a lot of people left, when they're criticising her, are nasty and horrible to her. And predictably, she got into trouble for saying that with her fellow Democrats and other people on the left. How dare she say that? Some people say, "Oh, you're being played. You're being played by Fox. They want you to think that they're nice." But here's the thing: there's a lot of truth to what Marianne Williamson is saying, and that's this: think of conservatives and think of progressive liberals and progressive leftists and socialists. Now, conservatives generally have more respect for their elders. They have more respect for society in general, and they generally learn their values from their parents. Be polite, be nice, and they learn these kind of these values from their parents and from their churches and from the people that they look up to in authority. You know, be civil. Whereas progressives and socialists are often in rebellion to authority, the authority of their parents' generation. So they're often rebelling against their parents' values. They're often rebelling against church values. They're rebelling against the values of a civic and civil society. So to a lot of lefties, the idea of civility, we saw this happened last year, particularly over Kavanaugh, where it was said that there is no place for civility. You have to treat your political opponents as the enemy, as scum. And Marianne Williamson is defying that and just and is voicing her surprise that people on the right are more civil. And I don't think it's cynical from people on the right, speaking from experience. It's just the values. If you're a conservative, you have these values. You have these values that were taught to you by people you look up to, and you try and pass them on, because a lot of conservative family people. So we have children ourselves, and we want to impart those values of politeness and civility onto our children. So, yeah, no, this isn't cynical at all. It's just the way we conservatives are. Now, normally at this stage of the show, as I wrap up, I take a biscuit. I say, now that takes the biscuit, and I have a biscuit. But I'm doing something a bit different tonight, mainly because my family ate all the biscuits again. Right, I bought loads. I bought party wings, I had jammy dodgers, I had custard creams, they've all gone. So what I'm doing is I have contacts in America who send me atomic fireballs, my favourite hard candy. Can't get them in the UK. Can't get any candy or sweets that are cinnamon flavoured in the UK. Used to, when I was growing up, we had cinnamon Tic Tacs. We don't anymore. So this is just, lives up to its name, atomic fireball. So I'm on fire tonight. This is Rubber signing off on fire. Oh, bloody hell!